In the heart of Chicago, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and the streets pulsed with endless energy, lived a young man named Daniel Parker. At only 21, Daniel was the kind of dreamer people often underestimated. He worked long hours at a local cafe, balancing trays of coffee during the day, while at night he buried himself in textbooks at the University of Illinois. His life wasn't easy, but every sacrifice he made carried one purpose: to build a brighter future for himself and for the girl he loved more than anything. That girl was Emily Johnson, a radiant beauty with golden hair and eyes that sparkled whenever she laughed. Emily and Daniel had been together since their final year of high school, their love blossoming under the innocent promises of youth. For Daniel, Emily wasn't just a girlfriend, she was his anchor, the reason he endured sleepless nights and double shifts. He would often whisper to her that one day he would own his own company, that she would never have to worry again, and that all the struggles they faced now would be worth it. In their early years together, Emily believed him. They would sit on park benches near Lake Michigan, watching the sunset paint the water with gold, and talk about the future. Daniel's eyes would light up as he described his vision: a life free from financial worries, a home they could call their own, and endless adventures together. Emily would smile, resting her head on his shoulder, and for a time it seemed like nothing could break the bond between them. But dreams take time, and time has a way of testing love. As the months turned into years, the weight of reality pressed harder on Emily. She watched as her friends began dating men who already had established careers, nice cars, and expensive apartments downtown. Social media was filled with pictures of trips to Europe, candlelit dinners, and diamond jewelry. Meanwhile, Daniel was still pouring every ounce of energy into his studies and part-time jobs. Arriving home late at night with tired eyes and empty pockets. At first, Emily tried to be patient. She told herself that Daniel's sacrifices would eventually pay off. But doubt slowly crept in, whispering that maybe his dreams were nothing more than empty promises. When she looked at her friends living lives of luxury and compared them to her own, the gap felt unbearable. And then, one night at a party hosted by her wealthy coworker, Emily met someone who seemed to embody everything she thought she wanted. His name was Richard Collins, a confident man in his late 20s who came from money and carried himself with the ease of someone who never had to worry about bills or late rent. Richard drove a sleek black Mercedes, wore tailored suits, and had the kind of charm that made people gravitate toward him. To Emily, he looked like the future she had been waiting for, the kind of man who could give her everything Daniel couldn't. That night marked the beginning of a dangerous shift in her heart. While Daniel was still grinding away, believing that their shared dream was enough to hold them together, Emily was already drifting. She began to answer Daniel's texts less quickly, to cancel dates with flimsy excuses, and to spend more time in Richard's orbit. Daniel, though exhausted, noticed the change. He tried harder, working longer hours, skipping meals to save money, and assuring Emily that their better life was just around the corner. But instead of drawing her closer, his efforts only seemed to widen the gap. The breaking point came one evening when Daniel, with trembling hands, brought Emily to their favorite park by the lake. He told her how much he loved her, how every hour of his struggle was for her, and how he believed their future would be extraordinary. But Emily, with tears in her eyes, confessed what he had feared the most. She couldn't wait anymore. She was leaving him for Richard. Her words hit Daniel like a thunderclap. He stood there in stunned silence, the sound of waves crashing against the pier echoing in the background. Every dream he had painted, every sacrifice he had made, seemed to shatter in that moment. Emily walked away, leaving him alone beneath the city lights, his heart breaking with each step she took. That night, Daniel sat on his small apartment floor, staring at the ceiling as the weight of loss crushed him. But beneath the pain, a spark ignited. If Emily thought he wasn't enough now, He vowed he would prove her wrong, not to win her back, but to become the man he always knew he could be. He promised himself that he would rise, no matter how long it took, and one day the world would see what he was truly capable of. The days following Emily's departure were some of the darkest Daniel had ever known. His small one-bedroom apartment felt colder than ever, the silence reminding him of her absence with every passing hour. He would catch himself reaching for his phone to text her, only to remember she was gone, likely sitting in the passenger seat of Richard's Mercedes, laughing at jokes Daniel would never hear. Nights became a torment. He replayed their last conversation over and over, wondering if he could have said something different, done something more to keep her from walking away. But somewhere in the depths of that pain, a new voice began to rise within him. It wasn't the voice of despair, it was the voice of resolve. Daniel realized that the heartbreak, as crushing as it was, could become the very fuel he needed to ignite his transformation. He told himself that Emily leaving was not the end of his story, it was only the beginning of a new chapter. He doubled down on his studies, pushing himself beyond exhaustion. While other students celebrated on weekends, Daniel locked himself in the library, devouring books on business, finance, and entrepreneurship. He attended every seminar, raised his hand in every lecture, and asked questions long after class had ended. Professors began to notice his intensity, some even pulling him aside to ask what was driving him. He never told them the full truth, but deep inside he knew he was building a future so powerful that no one could ever again look at him as not enough. Outside of school, Daniel's work ethic reached another level. At the cafe, he started taking extra shifts, not just to pay rent, but to learn about people. He noticed patterns in how customers behaved, what made them return, and how small changes in service created loyalty. These observations planted ideas in his mind, ideas about building something of his own one day. His coworkers admired his dedication, though some whispered he was burning himself out. But Daniel didn't care. Every drop of sweat, every hour of lost sleep, was another step toward the man he was destined to become. Physically, he changed too. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, he began running through the city streets at dawn, using the pain in his chest as motivation to push harder. He joined a modest gym nearby, lifting weights with a quiet fury that caught the attention of trainers. Slowly, his once slender frame grew stronger, his posture straighter, his presence more commanding. Even strangers began to notice him differently: cashiers, classmates, even the barista at a rival coffee shop who smiled when he walked in. For the first time, Daniel realized that transformation wasn't only about financial success, it was about becoming the best version of himself in every way. Months turned into years, and with every passing day, Daniel inched closer to his dream. He secured an internship at a local startup, working under a seasoned entrepreneur who saw something rare in him. While others treated the internship as just another resume line, Daniel treated it like his golden ticket. He stayed late, asked to take on projects outside his role, and even volunteered to solve problems others avoided. His mentor often told him, "You've got the fire, kid. Don't let it burn out." Those words stuck with him, reinforcing his belief that he was meant for something greater. Meanwhile, Emily's life with Richard looked glamorous on the surface. Social media painted a picture of luxury vacations, expensive gifts, and nights at high-end restaurants. But Daniel no longer stalked her profiles, no longer allowed himself to drown in envy. Instead, he let her choices serve as a reminder of why he was working so hard. While she chased temporary comfort, he was building something lasting, something that would stand the test of time. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Nights when bills piled up, when exhaustion left him questioning whether all his sacrifices were worth it. He would sit at his desk, staring at his vision board taped to the wall, pictures of successful entrepreneurs, skyscrapers, and the word future written in bold letters. In those moments, He remembered the promise he made to himself, the night Emily left, to rise no matter how hard it became. And that promise kept him moving forward. By the time Daniel graduated, he was no longer the heartbroken young man Emily had left behind. He walked across the stage with his diploma in hand, but more importantly, with a fierce determination burning in his eyes. He had gained not only knowledge, but also connections, discipline, and a vision for something bigger than himself. He was ready to step into the world, not as a boy chasing a dream, but as a man on the path to creating it. And while fate had been harsh in taking Emily away, it was already preparing a surprise one that neither she nor Daniel could have ever imagined. With his diploma in hand and a burning fire in his heart, Daniel knew it was time to step beyond classrooms and lectures. The world outside was far harsher, filled with uncertainty and competition, but that didn't intimidate him. He had already endured heartbreak, sleepless nights, and endless sacrifice. What could possibly stop him now? Daniel's first bold move came just months after graduation. He had been saving every dollar he could from his cafe job and internship, living on the bare minimum, while others his age spent money on new cars, nights out, and vacations. Instead, Daniel poured his savings into a modest but promising idea, a small tech startup focused on digital tools to help small businesses streamline their operations. It wasn't glamorous, and most people around him doubted it would succeed. Some even laughed, telling him he was too young, too inexperienced, and too naive to compete in a world where established giants already ruled the industry. But Daniel didn't let their doubts shake him. He rented a tiny office space in downtown Chicago, barely big enough for a desk, a whiteboard, and 2 folding chairs. The walls were cracked, the carpet smelled faintly of mildew, and the heating barely worked in the winter. Yet to Daniel, it was more than an office. It was the birthplace of a dream. He worked day and night, sketching business models, coding alongside a freelance programmer he convinced to join him at a reduced rate, and pitching his ideas to anyone who would listen. The first months were brutal. Investors turned him down repeatedly, some not even bothering to hide their skepticism. "You're too ambitious for your age," they would say. Or worse, "Come back when you've failed a few times, then maybe we'll talk." Bills piled up, his savings dwindled, and there were nights he slept on the office floor because the commute back to his apartment felt like wasted time. Many would have given up, but Daniel remembered Emily's words, the look in her eyes when she left him for someone with more. That memory became fuel for every rejection he endured. Finally, a break came when a local business owner, a small restaurant struggling to stay afloat, agreed to try Daniel's software. Daniel personally installed the system, trained the staff, and checked in almost daily to make sure it worked seamlessly. Within weeks, the restaurant began noticing improvements: faster service, reduced waste, and better communication between staff. Word spread, and soon another small business signed on, then another. It wasn't an explosion of success, but it was the beginning of credibility. For Daniel, those first clients felt like winning gold. The growth was slow, but Daniel treated each small victory like a major milestone. He reinvested every penny back into the business, often skipping meals and wearing the same worn-out shoes for years. While his friends enjoyed their 20s, Daniel was building something far more valuable: resilience, reputation, and results. He learned to negotiate contracts, lead a small team, and solve problems on the fly. Each mistake became a lesson, each setback a stepping stone toward something greater. As the business expanded, Daniel's presence began to change too. He was no longer just the quiet boy who had once been overlooked. Now, when he walked into meetings, people noticed his confidence, the way he spoke with clarity and conviction, the way he carried himself as if he belonged in the room. He wasn't pretending. He had earned that presence through years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Emily's life with Richard wasn't the fairy tale she had imagined. Though Richard's wealth provided her with luxury, she began to feel the emptiness behind it all. Their relationship lacked the sincerity and warmth Daniel had once given her. Richard was successful, but he was also arrogant and self-centered, more interested in flaunting his status than in building a meaningful partnership. Slowly, Emily realized she had traded love for comfort, and comfort without love quickly became hollow. But while her world was losing its shine, Daniel's was just beginning to glitter. His company, once a fragile idea scribbled on a whiteboard, started attracting the attention of bigger clients. A regional chain of coffee shops signed a contract, providing Daniel with the first substantial revenue his business had ever seen. He hired a few full-time employees, rented a larger office space, and finally replaced his old laptop that had overheated countless times during late-night work sessions. For Daniel, success was no longer just a dream, it was a reality in motion. He could feel himself rising, step by step, into the future he had promised himself years ago. And while he didn't know it yet, fate was already setting the stage for a dramatic encounter with the very person who once broke his heart. The day was coming when Emily would see Daniel again, but this time, he would not be the heartbroken boy she left behind. He would be the man who had turned heartbreak into power and pain into an empire. Years passed, and what had once been a humble startup in a cramped Chicago office had transformed into a thriving enterprise. Daniel's company, Next Gen Solutions, had carved out a reputation as one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the Midwest. What began as a software tool for small restaurants and shops had expanded into a full suite of products that catered to retail chains, schools, and even healthcare facilities. Daniel had stayed true to his vision of helping small businesses compete in a fast-moving world, and that vision resonated with thousands of clients. The success wasn't overnight. It came through endless late nights, risks that could have bankrupted him, and countless failures he had to learn from quickly. But through it all, Daniel's resilience shone. He had grown from a passionate dreamer into a sharp, disciplined CEO who commanded respect in boardrooms filled with seasoned executives twice his age. Investors who once dismissed him were now scrambling to partner with him, and for the first time, Daniel had the financial stability he had once promised. Emily but couldn't deliver. With his newfound success came a transformation in his personal life as well. Daniel no longer carried the weight of rejection in the same way he once did. Instead, he used it as a reminder of how far he had come. He traded his worn-out shoes for tailored suits, his modest apartment for a sleek penthouse overlooking the Chicago skyline, and his tired old car for a black Tesla that symbolized both his values and achievements. But despite all the luxuries he could now afford, Daniel remained grounded. He never forgot the nights he went hungry or the times he was laughed at. His humility made him admired not just by his employees, but by other entrepreneurs who saw him as an inspiration. While Daniel's star was rising, Emily's life with Richard was showing cracks that no amount of wealth could fix. At first, the expensive vacations, designer handbags, and lavish parties had thrilled her, but over time, she realized they were nothing more than distractions from the emptiness of her relationship. Richard was not the attentive, loving partner she had once dreamed of. He was controlling, dismissive, and obsessed with his own image. He flaunted Emily on his arm like a trophy, but rarely showed her the respect or care she craved. Arguments became frequent, and Emily found herself longing for the genuine connection she had once shared with Daniel. She remembered the way he used to encourage her, the way he spoke about building a future together, and the way he believed in love over material things. But that was gone now, replaced with coldness and regret. Her regret deepened when Richard's business ventures took a downturn. He lost a major contract, and suddenly their luxurious lifestyle was not as secure as it once seemed. The parties became less frequent, the expensive gifts stopped coming, And Emily began to see a side of Richard she had never imagined: angry, bitter, and cruel. For the first time, she questioned the choices she had made. Meanwhile, Daniel's influence spread beyond Chicago. He was invited to conferences as a keynote speaker, featured in business magazines, and even listed on Forbes 30 Under 30. His story of perseverance resonated with audiences everywhere, how he rose from heartbreak and poverty to build an empire. People admired not only his business success, but his authenticity. He wasn't a billionaire playboy flaunting yachts or mansions. He was a man who had built something meaningful, who believed in lifting others up along the way. It wasn't long before Daniel began considering expansion on a national scale. Venture capitalists lined up to invest, and major corporations expressed interest in acquiring his company for millions. But Daniel wasn't ready to sell. This company was more than a business to him. It was the proof of his resilience, the promise he had once made to himself that he would rise above the pain. Selling it now would feel like betraying that journey. And then came the day that would change everything. NextGen Solutions was looking to expand its workforce dramatically, opening hundreds of new positions in offices across the country. Job postings flooded the market, attracting applicants from all backgrounds and experiences. Among the stack of resumes that eventually made their way into HR was one that would stop Daniel in his tracks. Emily got her relationship with Richard had ended in disaster, leaving her with nothing but debt and regret. Desperate for stability, she had started applying for jobs everywhere she could. When she stumbled upon an opening at NextGen Solutions, she didn't even realize at first who the CEO was. It wasn't until she received a callback for an interview that she saw the name, Daniel Parker. Her heart sank. The boy she had left behind was no longer the struggling dreamer. He was the man at the helm of one of the fastest-growing companies in America. Panic and curiosity collided inside her. What would he think of her now? Would he even agree to see her? And most importantly, could she convince him to forgive her for the choices she had made? Emily walked into that interview room with trembling hands, uncertain of what awaited her. And when she saw Daniel for the first time in years, standing tall and confident behind his desk, she realized the future had indeed prepared a surprise for her, one she never saw coming. The silence in the room was suffocating. Emily stood frozen near the door, her heart pounding as she took in the man before her. Daniel Parker was not the boy she had left behind years ago. He was composed, confident, and commanding every inch the successful CEO she had read about in magazines. His suit was sharp, his eyes steady, and there was a quiet authority in his presence that made the air heavy. For a brief second, Emily thought about turning around and walking out, pretending the interview had never happened. But it was too late. Daniel had already looked up from the papers on his desk, his gaze locking with hers. Those familiar brown eyes, once full of youthful hope and warmth, now carried something different: strength, distance, maybe even a touch of coldness. Emily's voice cracked as she spoke his name, almost in a whisper. She tried to smile, to break the tension, but her lips trembled. Daniel didn't smile back. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying her as though she were a stranger. The boy who once hung on her, every word was gone. When Emily sat down, clutching her resume like a lifeline, Daniel finally spoke. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was an edge beneath it. He asked her about her experiences, her skills, her qualifications. It was all very professional, but Emily could feel the weight of unspoken history in every word. She stumbled through her answers, but her mind wasn't on the questions. It was on him, on the memories of the nights he would walk her home, the way he would talk about their future, the promises he made to her with such sincerity. And now here he was, living that future without her. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, Emily dropped the facade. She confessed that she hadn't come just for the job. She admitted that she regretted everything leaving him, choosing Richard, chasing a life that had left her empty. Tears welled in her eyes as she told him she never stopped thinking about him, that she still believed in what they once had. She even reached across the desk, as if trying to bridge the chasm between them. But Daniel didn't move. His expression remained calm, unreadable. The years of heartbreak, of rejection, of nights questioning his worth, those memories weren't gone. They had shaped him, and now they shielded him. For the first time, Daniel held the power, and Emily could feel it in the silence that followed her words. Outside the office, employees passed by, oblivious to the storm brewing within. But to Daniel and Emily, the world had shrunk to that one room, that one moment. Daniel thought about the boy he used to be, the boy who would have given anything just to hear her say she cared. And now here she was, saying it when it no longer mattered. Emily begged him for another chance, her voice breaking with desperation. She painted a picture of how things could be different, how they could start over. She promised she had changed, that she now understood what truly mattered. Daniel stood up, walking slowly to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline that symbolized his journey. He thought about how far he had come, the battles he had fought, the sacrifices he had made. Everything he had built came from the fire of that heartbreak, from the ashes of the life she had walked away from. When he finally turned back to face her, Emily searched his face for hope, for a smile, for any sign that the man she once knew was still there. Instead, what she saw was resolve. Calm, steady, and unshakable resolve. This was not the ending she had expected. And yet, deep down, maybe she had always known it would come to this. Because the truth was, Daniel had moved on. The office was quiet enough that Emily could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her chest. Her tears glistened in the light, spilling through the large glass windows as she waited for Daniel's response. She wanted desperately to believe there was still hope, that the boy who once promised her the world would be merciful enough to give her a second chance. Daniel's steps were slow and deliberate as he walked back to his desk. He placed both hands on the polished wood surface and leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Emily, not with anger, but with a calm authority that cut deeper than rage ever could. He told her that he had indeed loved her once, with every part of his being. He reminded her of the nights they dreamed together, of the sacrifices he made, of the promises that kept him alive when everything else seemed against him. But then his tone shifted. He explained that her choice to leave him for wealth and comfort had broken something inside him, something that could never truly be repaired. Emily tried to interrupt, but Daniel's words flowed like steel. He told her that it wasn't about revenge or holding a grudge. It was about growth. Her rejection had forced him to find his strength, to push beyond his limits, to become the man standing before her now. In a way, he admitted, he even owed her gratitude. Without the pain of losing her, he might never have had the fire to succeed. But that didn't mean he wanted her back. Emily's breath caught in her throat as he calmly told her that the chapter of their love was closed. He was no longer the young man begging for her approval. He was someone entirely new. Someone who had built an empire not to prove his worth to her, but to prove it to himself. The sting of rejection cut through Emily, and she broke down, sobbing openly. She pleaded, saying she could help him now, that she understood what love really meant, that she would never make the same mistake again. But Daniel's eyes softened only with pity, not affection. He reminded her that true love is proven in the hard times, not when everything is easy. When she walked away at his lowest, she showed him where her heart really was. And now, after all these years, when he had climbed to heights she never imagined, she wanted to return not out of love, but out of regret. Emily buried her face in her hands, realizing the weight of her mistake. The man she had once considered not enough was now far beyond her reach. And no amount of apologies could change that. Daniel sat back in his chair, his decision final. He told her politely, but firmly, that there was no position for her at NextGen Solutions, no future for her by his side. She was free to build her life however she wished, but it would no longer involve him. The words struck her harder than any insult could. They were simple, final, and devastating. Emily stood on shaky legs, her entire body trembling as she walked toward the door. For a moment she turned back, hoping against hope for one last glance of the boy she once knew. But the man she saw now was different, stronger, wiser, and unshakably free from her shadow. She left the office in silence, her footsteps echoing down the hall like the sound of a door slamming shut on her past. And Daniel? He sat quietly for a moment, staring at the city below. There was no anger, no bitterness, only peace. For the first time, he realized he had truly moved on. What Emily had thought was the end of her story was, for Daniel, just another reminder that he had chosen the right path. The boy she left behind was gone forever. And in his place stood a man who no longer needed her love to feel complete. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply as the weight of the past lifted from his shoulders. The moment was more than just rejecting Emily. It was a declaration of freedom, proof that he had broken free from the chains of old wounds and insecurities. For years, he had carried the shadow of her rejection, but now he felt lighter than ever. As he looked out over the city skyline, Daniel realized how far he had come. The young man who once worked late nights in a grocery store while studying engineering textbooks under dim lights had transformed into a visionary leader admired by thousands. His journey had been filled with loneliness, sacrifice, and doubt, but he had never given up. Every failure, every heartbreak, and every moment of pain had carved the man he had become. Meanwhile, Emily's world looked very different. Word quickly spread through town that she had applied for a job at NextGen Solutions and been turned away. Friends who once envied her for dating Daniel in high school now whispered about how she had chosen comfort over love, only to end up empty-handed. She found herself reflecting on the moment she walked away, realizing that her search for an easier path had cost her the greatest treasure she would ever know. She watched Daniel from a distance, sometimes on magazine covers, in interviews, at charity events where he spoke about resilience and never giving up. Each time she saw him, the ache in her chest grew heavier. She understood that she could never step back into his life, but she also couldn't escape the lesson carved into her heart. Love and loyalty must be stronger than temporary desires. For Daniel, the story moved forward with hope and purpose. He began investing not just in his company, but in people who reminded him of his younger self, dreamers, underdogs, and those who had been overlooked. He funded scholarships, mentored students from modest backgrounds, and became a voice of encouragement for anyone struggling to believe in their own potential. At every speech he gave, he repeated the same message: don't let anyone's doubt define your worth. Believe in yourself, even when no one else does. The people who walk away from you only give you the chance to grow into who you're meant to be. And the audiences always responded, some wiping tears from their eyes, others applauding with renewed determination. Daniel's story wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Back in his office late one evening, Daniel reflected once more. The pain of losing Emily had been real, but it had pushed him toward greatness. Her absence had forced him to rely on his own strength. And in the end, what felt like a curse had turned out to be a blessing. As for Emily, she eventually built a quieter life. Though regret never fully left her, she carried the memory of Daniel not as a lost opportunity, but as a reminder to never take true love or genuine character for granted again. And so, the story ends with a lesson carved in stone. Sometimes the greatest heartbreak is the very thing that shapes us into who we're destined to be. Because the truth is, Success is not about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Now let me ask you, what would you have done in Daniel's place? Would you have taken Emily back? Or would you have walked away forever? Tell me in the comments, because your perspective might inspire someone else who's facing the same decision right now. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Share it with a friend who needs a reminder that setbacks can become the foundation for success. This isn't just Daniel's story. It's proof that no matter how deep the pain, no matter how heavy the loss, you have the power to rise, rebuild, and shine brighter than ever.